Karen's first confrontation at the ranch gate was like a scene straight out of a bad TV drama. I had just pulled my truck up, unloading a few boxes and tools, when she came marching across the gravel road in her bright sun hat, clutching a clipboard like it was a badge of authority. Her eyes were locked on me as if I had just broken into Fort Knox. "You can't be here," she barked before I even had the chance to say hello. I tried to explain calmly that this was my late grandpa's property and I had every right to move in, but she wasn't having it. She kept waving her arms, pointing at the gate like it was sacred ground, demanding to see HOA approval for my move. I couldn't help but raise an eyebrow. OA approval? On land my family had owned for decades, sitting well outside the boundaries of their precious association. She stomped her foot, threatening to call security, even though the ranch was nowhere near her jurisdiction. It was clear she wasn't just upset. She was determined to assert power over something that didn't belong to her. And I knew right then this was only the beginning. Her demand for HOA paperwork that doesn't exist came with an intensity that made it almost laughable. She stood there, chin high, insisting that no one could occupy the ranch without official clearance from the HOA board. I tried to reason with her, telling her this ranch was privately owned and never tied to her community. But she flipped through her clipboard like it held the Constitution itself. She jabbed a finger at imaginary bylaws, rattling off rules about lawn height, exterior paint colors, and even mailbox placement, as if any of it applied here. When I pointed out that the ranch sat on county land and not inside the HOA's borders, she narrowed her eyes and accused me of lying, saying that all properties in this area were governed by her precious rules. Her voice grew sharper with each word, and she started raising her phone like she was preparing to dial reinforcements. I could see neighbors peeking out from across the road. Some curious, some amused, and others clearly tired of her theatrics. The absurdity of the moment hit me. She was demanding documentation that literally didn't exist, trying to force a square peg into a round hole. And still, she wouldn't back down. Neighbors gathering, unsure who's right, turned the whole scene into a small-town spectacle. As Karen's voice grew louder and sharper, more people began drifting toward the ranch gate, drawn by the commotion. Some leaned on fences, others stood in little clusters, whispering among themselves, trying to piece together what was happening. A couple of folks from the neighboring lots looked sympathetic, glancing at me as if they already knew Karen was blowing smoke. But others hesitated, shifting uncomfortably, unsure if maybe she had a point. Karen seized the moment like she was leading a courtroom trial, holding her clipboard high and announcing to the crowd that I was illegally occupying the ranch. She demanded witnesses, nodding to anyone who would validate her claim. But most just stayed quiet, clearly not wanting to be dragged into her drama. I explained calmly that this land had been in my family for generations and was never part of the HOA, but she kept interrupting, insisting the community had rules that applied to everyone. The tension in the air was thick, with neighbors torn between siding with her out of fear or letting the truth settle on its own. It felt less like a neighborhood dispute and more like a trial by audience. My grandpa's old property deeds proving no HOA ties became the one thing that shifted the energy in my favor. I had anticipated pushback when moving back onto the ranch, so I had already dug through my grandpa's files and brought copies of the original county records with me. When Karen doubled down, shouting about bylaws and trespassing, I calmly walked over to my truck, pulled out the folder, and held the papers up for everyone to see. The yellowed edges and official county stamps carried more weight than any rulebook she could wave around. A hush came over the group as I explained how the land had been deeded long before the HOA ever existed, and that the ranch fell under county jurisdiction, not her neighborhood association. A few neighbors leaned in, nodding as they read the documents, whispering things like "he's right" and "this isn't HOA property." Karen's face flushed red. But she wasn't ready to admit defeat. She claimed the documents were outdated, that somehow new rules overrode decades-old property rights, twisting her words to keep her authority alive. But with every eye now on the stamped county seals, it was clear her grip on the situation was slipping. Karen doubling down, calling in the HOA board, was her last desperate move to keep control of a situation already slipping through her fingers. She whipped out her phone and started dialing numbers with the urgency of someone reporting a crime in progress, pacing back and forth near the gate as if rallying troops. Within minutes, a couple of board members arrived, clearly annoyed that they'd been dragged out on a weekend afternoon. Karen immediately launched into a tirade, pointing at me like I was a trespasser caught red-handed, insisting that they enforce the rules and remove me from the property. The board members looked skeptical, glancing between her clipboard, my property deeds, and the ranch itself, which stood well beyond their associations, neatly trimmed lawns and cul-de-sacs. I calmly handed one of them the paperwork, explaining again that the ranch had never been under HOA jurisdiction and that this was private land inherited from my grandfather. They read through it carefully, their brows furrowing as they realized Karen had overstepped her authority. Still, Karen kept barking about community standards, her voice rising higher each time someone pointed out the obvious. She wanted backup, but instead she was digging herself into a deeper hole. The sheriff's arrival and the truth revealed turned the heated standoff into something no one could ignore. After the HOA board failed to get the reaction she wanted, Karen took it a step further and called the sheriff, reporting me as a trespasser. Within half an hour, a patrol car rolled up the dirt road, lights flashing just enough to draw even more neighbors to the scene. Karen immediately rushed forward, pointing dramatically in my direction, telling the sheriff that I had broken into community property and was refusing to leave. The sheriff listened quietly, then turned to me and asked for my side. I handed him the folder of property deeds, tax records, and the county map showing the HOA boundary lines. He studied them carefully, his expression changing from neutral to slightly amused as he realized the entire ordeal was built on Karen's false claim. When he looked back at her, his tone shifted, firm and direct, asking why she was interfering with private property that had never fallen under HOA authority. The neighbors, who had been hanging back, uncertain, now began whispering more boldly, some shaking their heads at Karen's persistence, others smirking at how quickly her story unraveled.